All right, good afternoon. It is 1:07 p.m. and I'm not calling anything to order
Okay.
because we're just here. We're here to discuss proposed bylaw amendments that are going to, amendments that are going to be proposed to the general and zoning bylaws on Thursday night. This is the last of 4 sessions. We're picking up where we started last time, so I will not be giving the presentation that you have in your packet. We'll just be talking through that other document, the consequential changes document. We'll finish the general bylaws, then we'll go into the zoning changes. Oh yeah, we're being recorded, we're being broadcast, we're on Zoom, not that it matters apparently at the moment. We will be rebroadcast on TV and put up on all our video on demand services, including YouTube. There, I remembered this time early. Sure. There we go. So where we're picking up is not what I have here, but we need a little refresher on this. We're picking up on what I call the multi-member body chapter of bylaws, which is the committees, most of the committees that we have live there. I wanted to go back to this because the sentence you will see in most of the first chapter's bylaws is removed membership rules dealt with elsewhere. That's because we have this this appointed committees bylaw that says that unless there's something in a law that says otherwise, the select board appoints, they serve without pay, they have to elect officers every year, terms run July 1 through June 30th, and 5 consecutive absences make a member eligible to be removed. Now, this is all here, so as it says right here, we don't have to repeat these in every bylaw. We only have to mention exceptions. So for example, the finance committee is not appointed by the select board, so in the finance committee bylaw, there's the appointing mechanism there. So let me, maybe I should click. Back a little bit. That's okay. Discussions about the Agricultural Commission. Remove membership sections covered elsewhere. I think I just talked about that. The the Agricultural Commission is allowed to exist, and we're allowed to write this bylaw because of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 8L. That defines the broad scope of the Agricultural Commission. Our bylaw supplements that with information about who appoints and how many members and all of that. That's and what the terms are. Something that's in our bylaw and has been for a long time, but is not in 8L. Back up a little more. This bylaw was originally passed when the town accepted originally Section 8L. The legislature made significant amendments about 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, to Section 8L. So the town readopted that section at town meeting. But there are things in 8L that have not existed in our bylaw. And so a bit of the work that we've done is making sure that 8L and our bylaw align in duties. One of the things that's different is that the 8L talks about members, and our bylaw has historically talked about both members and alternate members. Thank you. I could not remember the word. So we started to ask questions of town council. Yes, I know, memory. I'm getting to be an old man. I understand. The president and I have something in common, I guess.
I'm way older than you are.
So the Ad Hoc By-law Committee and Town Council had a discussion about that, and what it came out to be is that we can leave alternate membership in, there's no harm in it, and because our bylaw predates the Mass General Law changes, that our alternate membership sections are grandfathered in. so we don't have to worry about them. We're allowed to keep them in. Now, the biggest, most important to me change to 8L is the authority for the Agricultural Commission to purchase and hold and lease land. They were not allowed to do that in advance. Now, 8L talks about Agricultural Commission doing that for agricultural purposes, agricultural preservation, or recreation, or no, those are the only two uses I can remember. We already have a Conservation Commission who can hold land for conservation purposes and for recreational purposes. So in order to ensure that we don't have a conflict between those two bodies, we, in our section, pulled out, in our bylaw, I should say, did not include the recreational purposes as a reason to hold land for our Agricultural Commission. There are a couple other elements that we added to the bylaw. They came pretty much from 8L. Coordinate with other bodies. There are government bodies and non-governmental bodies and other agricultural groups that AgCom does and should continue to coordinate with in all of their work. In addition, we also added, again, from 8L, one of their duties is any other activity consistent with the purpose based on the bylaw's purpose, which is the preservation and gosh, my brain is bad today.
You've done this so many times.
I know. Promotion and development of the town agricultural resources. There you go. So that's the consequential changes to AgCom. Questions about that? Now, all of these bylaws in this chapter, they already exist in the town. We're not adding any, we're just updating all of them to be consistent with the town practices and all the laws and all of that. So let's move on to the bylaw committee. You may remember, those who were here last time, that one of the jobs this Ad Hoc By-law Committee did was to take all the duties for any, in this case, select board, but select board or town council or moderator or whatever, and we try to move them into a single location so that everything the select board has to do is in the select board bylaw. The current bylaw has members saying the select board shall refer to the bylaw committee all proposed bylaw amendments. I mean, it's a duty of the select board, so that is in the select board bylaw, so it was removed from this bylaw completely. As I said last time, when the Attorney General reviews all bylaw changes, and then the Attorney General gives a response to say, everything's fine. Everything's fine and we have a few comments. Everything's fine except for this section which we are striking. Or, this bylaw stinks. No, you may not have this bylaw. And the Attorney General has responded in each of those to the town over the years. As the committee was talking, one of the things we realized is we didn't have anybody specifically who's supposed to review AG responses to whatever the town accepts at town meeting. And so we said that's a good thing for the bylaw committee to do. They're responsible for getting it written. They're responsible for absorbing whatever the Attorney General's office says and reacting to that. Most of the time, it's please refer to town council when you enact this to make sure you're consistent with some other section of law. But they all need to be reviewed. The bylaw committee wrote the initial version in 2017? For
It's one of
2018
our
town meeting?
first-
Yeah.
One of our first.
We cleaned up a bit of language and a bit of duties to make it clear that the bylaw committee really are the right people to go through for anybody who wants to. And most bylaw changes come from some town official. I've seen them from DPW. I've seen them from, not the select board, I don't think I've ever seen any by the select board, but almost any committee or department head has ideas about how the laws should change. I've seen a number from the police department and the fire department. So we made it an explicit duty, if the town official doesn't go through the bylaw committee, which they should have, but if they didn't, the bylaw committee is still responsible for reviewing them before town meeting. Because at the very least, the bylaw committee has to answer the town moderator's question, bylaw committee, what is your view on this bylaw? And it doesn't apply to citizen petitions, but it should apply to every bylaw change that comes from in town and goes through its normal process. Public information sessions need to be advertised, and historically, and in a lot of laws, it's published in a newspaper in general circulation in the town, and depending upon the body, 1 week or 2 weeks before the public hearing or the meeting, whatever. We changed that because the select board adopted a policy that says that you can post on places like the website, and that's an acceptable posting. And the general laws are slowly catching up to technology, and rather than saying published in a newspaper in local circulation, that's going away because there aren't that many. And there are, I'd say, dwindling number. Everybody knows it. So we just changed the language to say that however the select board says we need to post, that's how it gets posted. One last thing that we removed, the bylaw today says that the bylaw committee may directly interact with town council for legal review. That is in conflict with the new town council bylaw, which says everybody has to go through the town administrator or the select board to get to town council. When the committee thought about it, we said, let's just make it consistent. Nobody gets special permission just because we're the bylaw committee. And in truth, today's bylaw reviews, we have a special fund allocated at town meeting, at town meeting for the purpose of legal review. And that's not going to be that way once town meeting's over, we're done. And that fund goes away. And it will be up to the bylaw committee and the town administrator and everyone else involved in the budget, not that I'm trying to minimize anybody, FinCom, to have a set of money set aside for legal review for bylaws. And since the town administrator acts basically as a gatekeeper for that, that's what's going on there. Questions on the bylaw committee? Council on Aging, not a lot of changes. Just like Agricultural Commission is based on Chapter 40, Section 8L. I don't have the sectional reference here, but the Council on Aging is based on a specific section of Mass General Laws. And so we reworked the purpose based on what the Mass General Law says, rather than having something that's very different. I'm just going to skip down a little bit. Alternate members explicitly are one-year terms, which is consistent with all the other alternate and associate memberships that are appointed to committees anyway. And there's a surprisingly important change the current bylaw says that the select board shall appoint alternate members. Well, the problem is, what happens when not enough members, not enough people submit applications, for lack of a better word, or letters of interest to say they're interested? How can the select board appoint? They can't meet their shall requirement if none of the people do it, which is why we changed the words from shall appoint to may appoint. Earthworks Board. That bylaw is pretty recent. It's actually less recent than the bylaw committee, but we saw problems there. We didn't see significant problems in the Earthworks Board, so we didn't change a lot there. And that's it for chapter 5. I will mention briefly the multi-member bodies that are not included in this chapter, Finance Committee and CIPC. They are more integrally related or intimately related with the financial aspects of the town, and so those two groups happen to be in the financial affairs chapter, not the multi-member body chapter. Just to say what I've said several times before, what they do is more important than what they are to us. Any questions on multi-member bodies? Moving down, we have a bylaw today called highways. A lot of what's in there is staying the same. But we didn't like the term highways. I mean, it's a very old term for roads. And so we're changing the title to public ways. There is currently a so this bylaw today says, don't throw stuff in the road. Don't throw leaves or debris or junk, and also specifically ice and snow. The current bylaw says you're not allowed to do that in public streets or squares. We broadened that to be public way or public right-of-way. A public way and a public right-of-way are bigger than just the street. It includes the sidewalks. Blocking a sidewalk should not be any more acceptable than blocking a road. At least that's the way the committee thinks about it. There's also the ability to tow cars, basically, if they interfere with emergency services, and we also added or blocks fire hydrants. There may be a general law that automatically allows that, but we thought that it would be good to stress it here. Scenic roads. All right, so this has changed quite a bit since the last time that we met and discussed scenic roads at one of these sessions, because we got legal review back and that made some interesting changes. So I'm just going to start at the top and work my way down this list. In the current bylaw, in only one place does it talk about removing scenic road designation from a road. So therefore, the original intent of the bylaw was to be able to remove that designation, which is also borne out by the Mass General Law that supports it or that enables it. We put adding or removing scenic road designation throughout the bylaw to make it more consistent that you can go either way. Used to be a public information session for some things and a public hearing for another, and council said, make them all hearings. Okay, so there are 2 times when hearings are involved in scenic roads. A scenic road designation, adding or removing, can be done by the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, and Historical Commission. Those are the three bodies that can do it by Mass General Law. So a citizen wants to make a road scenic, then you write to one or more of these boards and they hold a public hearing on it. And then, assuming that all goes forward, it gets placed on the warrant and voted at town meeting. And then that scenic road designation has been added or deleted. The other time when there has to be a hearing is when certain changes are made along the scenic road. Those changes are the cutting of trees and the destruction of stone walls. The cutting of trees is managed by the tree warden. And if the plan is to cut fewer than 4 trees for each 200 linear feet of roadway, something like that. If it's more than that, then the tree warden needs to hold a public hearing. If you're going to do anything with stone walls that's not temporary, you need a public hearing because it needs approval. Even temporary stone walls, like I need a driveway for 6 months to do work, and then I'm gonna put it back. That still requires approval, but it doesn't require a public hearing. The current bylaw says that you need a decision on these changes 60 days after the application has been received. Well, anybody who knows anything about public bodies knows they don't move particularly quickly. And although that's an interesting number, when you have a body that meets twice a month, the planning board. Hi, Peter. Hi, how you doing? That doesn't leave a lot of time to get whatever testimony and information that in this case the planning board would want as they hold their hearing. And so we changed it from, forget when the application's received. What we care about is when the public hearing is closed, saying they have 30 days after that to render a decision. And this is either the tree warden or the planning board. A quick note, I mentioned a group and a person who need to hold a hearing. If a certain set of work removes trees and destroys stone walls, then those, by the law, even the Mass General Law says those hearings can be held at the same time. So you only have to hold one hearing, but when it closes, whoever needs to make a decision needs to have it done in 30 days. Current bylaw says that when a submission has been made that you want, let's just simplify it and say somebody wants to make a section of road scenic. Yes, there's this hearing that they have to go through. And let's just say it came from the Conservation Commission. Conservation Commission says, yes, we believe that this should be done. The current bylaw says, which must be acted upon by town meeting, which is bad and wrong. Because that asserts a whole bunch of things happen, including forcing the select board to take an action that we're not allowed in our law to force the select board to take. We don't get to say, the bylaws don't get to say, the select board, an elected body, shall take this action. So we soften the language quite a bit to say that whoever approves the designation change makes a request to the select board to place an article on town meeting warrant. And then it's up to the select board to place it or not. But our law can't force them to place it. As I had said before, the current bylaw is not very clear about all the requirements for removing scenic road designation. It was the committee's opinion that having the 50% plus one threshold, a simple majority threshold to make something scenic is still good. But it was our opinion at the time that it should be 2/3 vote of town meeting to remove that designation. There is an explicit change that we added. There is an opinion in town, incorrect, that a scenic road may not be paved, and that is not correct. There is nothing in law that says, DPW wants to pave a road, go ahead. We have placed a requirement that the planning board hold a public hearing if that road is to go from unpaved to paved. This is if they're starting with take Brentnall and it's the shape that it's in. If DPW wants to pave it, they have to go through a public hearing and get that approved by the planning board. We changed a butter notification from 100 feet to 300 feet. That is to say there's a, yes, sir.
That brings up two questions.
Okay.
You were talking about cutting trees.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean that by the bylaws, someone has to get permission from the town to cut trees on their own property?
Within the right of way, yes. So all that this affect, we can only have bylaws that influence public property. And public property is all the way to the right of way that was taken by the town, which is usually stone wall to stone wall. And the roadway itself is much narrower than that, and trees aren't we hope trees won't grow in the middle of the road, but all along the sideway, trees can grow. So if trees are there to cut those trees, those are public trees on public land, not private land.
How wide is the public right-of-way that you're talking about?
That's defined by whatever the town took when they took the land for the road.
Took,
Yes.
not had granted to them.
It could have been granted, it could have been taken, it could have been purchased, it could have been, there's the whole eminent domain process is complicated.
Yeah, that's a problem.
However the town acquired ownership of the land, the longitude and latitude and distances and curves are all described in that taking.
And that brings up the second question. Changed a butter notification from 100 to 300 feet.
Yes.
Notification for what? How is a butter defined? And
Okay.
why the 100 to 300 feet?
Okay. So let's hit those one at a time. You need this notification for changes to the scenic road. So if a road is designated scenic and you have to go to a public hearing, part of what has to be done is you have to notify people that these changes want to be made. This has nothing to do with when the road is being made scenic or not made scenic. It only has to do with usually stone walls or tree cutting for that matter. So it is in this case, certain changes that require the authorization of either the planning board or the tree warden. When they hold a hearing, abutters need to be notified. Why? There's an interest to those who live next to the property. Now, our roadways have, I'm just going to tie a couple of bylaws, one they're going to see in a little bit. In our current bylaw, there is a new number for an address every 100 feet of roadway. That we're changing that, but ignore that. So, more than likely, that 100 feet covers only the immediate neighbors to the property that's being changed. An abutter is somebody who's property is within a supposed distance from the edge of the property line that's being changed. So, I happen to live in a cul-de-sac and there's a nice little roundabout, so pretend that I live on a scenic road, if I were to make stone wall changes, then the hearing would get notification to everyone who lived within 100 feet, which is going to be one person on each side, basically. We believe that this is changed to 300 feet for two purposes. One, we believe that a broader set of notifications is a good thing. The other thing is, all the other bylaws that we have in town that talk about abutter notification have 300-foot requirements. So we make it consistent with all other bylaws.
No, it isn't. No. There are 500-foot notifications.
For abutters?
500-foot.
Who is 500 foot?
500-foot with regard to discharge of firearms. It's 300 feet in New Hampshire. It's 500 feet in Massachusetts.
Right, but we don't have an explicit bylaw about that. So that's Mass General Law, that's not any of our bylaws. Our bylaws in conservation and all the other bylaws that I know about, including zoning, have 300-foot notifications.
And what happens when the notification says changed abutter notification from 100 to 300 feet? I believe that means notification to abutters.
Correct.
And that's the responsibility in most cases of the nearby people who are abutting to the person who has to be notified.
Right, so the applicant will be responsible for
What
changing
happens
them.
when the town violates that rule? For example, next to where I live, there are some, I guess you call them non-validated lots, or I don't know what the exact term is, some bureaucratic term. And the people who had houses built there were supposed to have a abutter notification. But because the houses there were built by a developer, they didn't do a abutter notification. And in fact, the developer violated the law because the developer did not own that land, and there never was any abutter notification that they'd be putting in substandard lots next to it. Therefore, that was the town's violation. And what happens when the town violates a law like that?
Well,
You know, we're talking about apparently people, residents violating laws and bylaws. But what happens when the town violates its own law?
the town is a body that can be enforced like any other body, though it will involve. What's not clear from this, because this isn't changing, is that the building inspector is responsible for enforcing this bylaw.
And when the building inspector visits people to say, okay, on the adjacent lot to where you live, they're going to be building a house, and one of the things they're going to be doing is blasting the ledge underneath. And the fire chief is given simple authority to grant that right because there are extensive explosive laws in Massachusetts,
Yep.
mostly violated by the government and the organized crimes. And the fire chief says, well, you don't have any right of protection against that blasting. And he says, I can legally give a permit for the blasting, even right up close to your property. nothing above 100, 300, 500 feet.
Well,
And the inspector who goes around tells people, well, we want to take photographs of your foundation in case any cracks occur. And frequently, no cracks occur anyway. And you tell them, no, stay out of here. And they get huffy about that. And then the blasting occurs violently and too close to your house, actually. No measurements. And you have a water problem. And then there doesn't seem to be any recourse about who's officially responsible for fixing the water problem that you have, whether it's a sewerage system or a well or whatever. So that kind of application becomes very anti-individual resident, and the town hides from it, either through the fire chief or the building inspector or some bylaw, and they point to the bylaw and says, well, it doesn't say you can't do this. So that's my specific questions on this. My general question is paperwork, okay. When all this was proposed for the changes, how much paperwork was eliminated on the existing bylaws? So now if we have 50 pages of bylaws, is that more than when we had 20 or something? Are we always ever increasing the number of bylaws in the town? Same system, same general evidence as when you're increasing the number of laws in a town, a county, a state. Is it always increasing? And did your committee go through the bylaws and find places where not only the quality of the bylaws, but the quantity can be reduced?
so, okay, you brought up quite a number of things, so let me see if I can get through them all. I do not know nearly enough about the explosives laws for Mass General Law other than what I've heard, so I haven't read them. So I can't possibly talk about what violation of any of those means. I just don't have the.
Or just lack of
domain.
notification
Right.
by the town?
But even then, that would be specific to that law. This specific line, notification from 100 to 300 feet is only for notification of the public hearing of changes to trees and stone walls along scenic roads. So this doesn't apply to any other bylaw, it applies only to this one. So I'm not able to comment at all intelligently about many of the comments that you made. Generically, I was going to use the word if, and that's always a mistake. Always use the word when. When the town violates any law, there is always a form of recourse. The only question is, not the only question, it starts with whether the recourse is civil or criminal. And there is the enforcement of the primary enforcement officers of the laws, but that's always backed up by the courts. So the recourse for violation or an event that adversely affected you is through the courts. Civil proceedings are different from criminal proceedings, and again, that's a space I don't know a whole lot about, but I know enough to know that I don't know it. And that's where, when the attorneys get involved, someone else could direct you better than I possibly could. I do want to step back to one comment that you made about they wanted to come in and take pictures of the foundation. That was for the town's protection, obviously. Or for that matter, for the developer's protection, whoever's actually doing the blasting. And no one has a right to enter your property without your permission. And if you say no, fine, they don't get on to take pictures. But that decision has other repercussions further down the civil liability line, because there becomes a question of evidence. Was this crack that you say appeared, did it appear then, or was it already there? How do we know? What's evidentiary? Again, court talk. All I can tell you is they certainly didn't have the right to enter your property, and if something bad happened to your house or foundation because of the blasting, that's a civil matter, I believe. If it impacts your water, same thing. There has to be, the recourse will end up being through the courts if anything happens or happened.
I would disagree. I think there's instances where that's a criminal matter too. And I think part of it deals with the abutter notification. And in many places, developers have special connections to the town people, some of the town people, inspectors or whatever. And frequently, maybe not frequently, but occasionally, which is too much, notifications that are responsibility of the town are avoided or ignored. And there seems to be very little recourse. For example, in the case of notification, when somebody's going to be doing blasting close to your land or your home or whatever, if you're not notified ever until it's happening, then there is no recourse. And that's a major objection. And I think when you have a plethora of town bylaws and you have appointed or elected people who are building inspectors, water inspectors, cow inspectors, whatever, you run a major risk of that. And then the town, which of course is not really a unit body, but there's a consensus maybe, or a vote, the town dodges the issue by saying, well, the inspectors approved it all, and even if they did it wrongly, you're out of luck. And not only that, but when there's a notification, whether it's about right-of-way scenic roads, or whether it's about construction or destruction activity adjacent to your own property, when there's a lack of notification, I think the town's doing something wrong. And I'll get to my general point now. My general point is as I read it, and maybe I'm wrong because maybe you guys did a great job and eliminated a lot of junk, but as I read it, this is just one more example of more and more regulations piling up and more restrictions put on the individual homeowner and more opportunity for the connected people to skirt around them with very little practical likelihood of being able to remedy the situation that was wrong in the first place afterwards. And I think that's the major issue here. It's the same actual major issue as with the state legislature. People run for state representative, state senator, and one of the things they do in their campaigning is they talk about and write about and encourage and tell, oh, I'm gonna vote for doing this, I'm gonna vote for doing that, and it's always more and more and more laws, more and more restrictions and things. And actually, a very simple question would be, okay, you're running for state representative, and you're part of the legislative body to make laws, and you're out campaigning that you're going to promote more of this, more of that. Really, aren't you insulting a lot of the people beforehand who for many decades have made the laws? And here we are now at a certain point, we should pretty much have all the laws needed existing, and you're out campaigning for more laws. Shouldn't you be campaigning to eliminate the irrelevant, the archaic, and the unnecessary laws? And of course, you'll find most of your candidates for public office aren't doing that. They're out promoting more and more, whether it's more bylaws or state laws or regulations, and it's getting pretty bad. And I would think that for this, the best job for your committee would be to go through all the bylaws and eliminate 20%, 50%, 80% of them, instead of adding on new ones or changing things to make it more regulations and more restrictions on individual people. And that's my main point.
Okay.
So I would hope that when you go back to the bylaw committee, if you could possibly shift the emphasis to, instead of making more laws and regulations, getting rid of as many as you can and have only a clear, easy to understand network of laws that are violating people's rights or the general progress or financial aspect of the town. And it's just more part of the same problem. The budget in the town increases every year. The vote on it generally goes up, and we're doing exactly the wrong thing compared to what the whole concept of the United States of America is. And I think we need more people reversing that, whether on a bylaw committee, which can be fine, or in a state legislature, or out as an inspector of some sort who's now enforcing regulations, or even the police department enforcing bylaws that are being supposedly violated, especially when it's by people who don't even know that there are bylaws that they are violating. And yet when the town officials of any sort, any particular branch, are the ones who are really the guilty people, they get scot-free off, and it's like they have immunity. And I think actually the people who in town who make decisions that are legal-based should not have immunity. Like, for example, if you made a bylaw that was detrimental to people, I should think that the average citizen should be able to go to the court system and have that repealed, and you or whoever does it should then be liable for fixing the damages. And that's my point.
We are getting into some very deep philosophical space, and I'm not going to address a lot of it, because that's not the purpose of this committee or this meeting today. But I do want to talk about a couple things you brought up. This set of bylaw amendments repeals one bylaw, the non-criminal disposition bylaw, and adds one bylaw, the town administrator bylaw, because we don't have one today. The scope of the bylaws fundamentally has not changed unless Mass General Law changed. So the effective regulation is the same as it was after town meeting, no matter what happens, and today. bylaws and regulations, as a rule, virtually everyone has been written because something happened and it's been considered that it has a public interest and not a private interest. Scenic roads, it has been decided that certain changes in the right-of-way along a scenic road have public import, and so those need to be, those changes need to be regulated and approved. I would think that anyone who goes into a session saying we should eliminate 25% of our bylaws is kidding themselves. That is hopelessly naive. I'm not saying that all regulations are good, and in fact, I did say the majority of bylaws and regulations are passed based on an event. Why do we have building code? Because people built unsafe houses, and that poses an interest not only to the people who live there, is to the next people who live there, and to the public safety officials who have to enter that location. Why do we have code that defines how good a road is? Because the road has to stand up to the travels on it. Why do we have regulations about scenic roads? I've already sort of covered that. Every bylaw comes out of the sense that the public has an interest in what happens. None of that is changed with this bylaw committee. None of it. It all stays the same. One of the things you'll notice in that packet is that we did not set out to say, how should things be? We set out to write how things are. That is a very important philosophical set that could be changed with the next bylaw committee when it sits down. And nobody wants to hear that there isn't an easy solution to the town violating its own laws. I don't dispute that. And I still maintain that the end result, if somebody wants to really take action against the town, it needs to be done in the court of law. It can't be done. I don't believe you will find a lot of satisfaction in any other venue. That's just my gut feel on it. Nobody likes to hear it. I don't like to say it. But at the end of the day, it is, I believe, the truth.
But can you answer my basic philosophical question, which is a quantitative one? When all this is said and done, will there be more bylaws or fewer bylaws than we have right now?
The same number. The exact same
And
number.
as far as the number of bylaws, will the quantity of the verbiage in them be the same, more or less?
There are almost universally more words than there were before. Because the bylaw committee were very interested in ensuring that things are clear. Not necessarily as concise as they can be, though we frequently stripped a lot of words out to make things more concise. But we are more interested in ensuring that people can read and understand the laws than we were in the format of how they have been until now.
Well, that's good, that's good. So you should make them more concise and clearer and simplified. And are you doing that? Are you making them more concise, simpler, and clarity?
They can only be so simple and be complete. When you have to spell out what the process for a public hearing is, you have to spell it out. I can't make fewer words I can't make something smaller if I have to add sections. If you look at the size of the select board bylaw that's current and the size of the select board bylaw that's being proposed, the new select board bylaw is considerably larger because we tried to be complete and clear. But there are only so many words you can pull out of a sentence and still have it be an actual English sentence.
I get that, yeah, I understand that.
So we did, two of our focuses were clarity. I'll just stick with clarity. We tried very hard to make it clearer and easier to understand the laws than as they are written today. That was our attempt. We'll let town meeting decide if that happened. Or they'll just go along because they say it's time to.
I get your point, but actually, I don't actually see that. Just the fact that I had to ask some questions about change the abutter notification. Well, how was the abutter notified?
The abutter is normally notified by registered mail, return receipt. And the process in planning board, specifically I know, and Conservation Commission and other bodies, you are required, the applicant is required to show the green cards. There's proof of delivery before the hearing starts, so that people are sure that abutters can be as notified as they can be. Now, all that means, there are people I know who have a post office box who go there once every 6 weeks because they don't feel like picking up the mail. It doesn't say you have to know for certain that the person received it, opened it, read it. There's no way to know that. But notification is the process of providing the notification in a way that the receiver can get it. And what that changed from 1 to 300 just says the number of people notified is greater than it is today.
But the burden of proof needs to be on the innovator or the aggressor or the person who's getting advantage for themselves or somebody else,
Yeah.
rather than on the victim, so to speak.
The burden of proof
And it
is.
should be an automatic violation and an automatic, I don't know how to phrase it, but an automatic restoration of the previous situation for the victim, instead of being, oh, well, you have to file a lawsuit in court because of that. Oh, if the town didn't follow their own regulations on abutter notification, and the town can't show that it had sent at least a registered mail notification to the person whose rights are being violated by not filling out, following their own town bylaws, we don't have a good system. And that actually brings up another thing about notification. We have a town meeting coming up at some point here. We used to have the warrant articles printed and distributed, I believe, to all registered voters, maybe to all residents.
Anita, has that ever been done to your knowledge?
I'm assuming when we had a couple hundred people
did have
living in
that, yeah.
town, but I've been in town since
But I find in
70s.
recent years, that's not happening. We're not being distributed to voters. And the excuse has been in town after town after town. Oh, it saves the town $4,000 or $6,000 or whatever. But what's overlooked is that when you don't have that information for people to read and study as needed before the town meeting, you get special interest groups going to the town meeting and voting in the things that they want that a lot of other people, if they had time to study it, wouldn't want. And so the town ends up not saving $6,000 or $4,000 or $12,000, whatever, on printing, but ends up spending it $50,000 or $100,000 or $2 million more. And I think it relates to this too. I think the town should have to put out the old style, complete warrant articles and other things like bylaw potential changes, not just on the internet, but in print form, so that people can take it with them and study it at their leisure, and then go to the town meeting and vote against many of the things that get voted in. And that's happened many times at recent town meetings, not only here, but in most other towns in the area.
If you
And-
want that, sir, you can go to the town hall and request a copy.
Yeah, you can go to the town hall, but a lot of people work. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of people don't have good computer access, and you can't always take your computer with you and study it during your lunch break at work or something. So I think that relates to this too. And I think in the town warrant article, there should be an explanation for all these things. Is this going to increase the amount of legal hurdles that you might have to get by? Or have we found a way to get rid of the unnecessary ones? For example, the state passed a law years ago. It's called Title V. Now, there's a lot of Title Vs, as you know. And the Title V, so-called, is a vast increase in the regulation and rules on private septic systems. And if somebody is selling their house, they have to have it inspected and pass the Title V qualifications. And if it doesn't, then it's got to be repaired at thousands of dollars of cost for the most part, for many people. And most of the people I've ever talked to around, not just Rutland, but the whole western half of Massachusetts minor cities, have found that they have had to spend money unnecessarily because of that.
Well,
And
if I may, the state would not say that was unnecessary. The state would say that that Title V as subsurface waste elimination is the best system we know how, and that systems that don't meet those regulations represent a public health and safety problem, and that's why the regulations
And that's
exist.
hogwash. I know
Well-
many situations where there are private septic systems, even 100 or more years old, that have never failed and are not polluting, that would not pass the Title V regulation inspection. And I know that was done by Senator Cohen from some of the South Shore communities. And it's different for public sewerage system than it is for private sewerage systems. And we've run into that time and time again. And you mentioned about, well, we can't have this narrowed down to simple terms because you have to have it explain what it is. Well, there's a big issue now coming up where there is a simple term that really nails the legality of it. And it's shall not be infringed. That's a very short term. And that's violated repeatedly, and that's coming under bigger pressure now.
Well, I could go on a very long rant about the Second Amendment specifically, but we're not doing that here. It's time for us to get back to our
I know, it's the
bylaws
same
and our
kind of
discussion.
issue in general. So town bodies, state bodies, federal government, all have a responsibility to put it down into clear-cut, straightforward, simple words that the courts can't fudge around on it and say, oh, it really means this or it really means that. And as we increase the amount of
Unfortunately, you
papers,
will also learn that there's no such thing as a sentence that cannot be interpreted multiple ways. I haven't found one yet. And I've seen a lot of sentences in my life.
yeah, but getting to the more fundamental issue, we have laws in this country focus momentarily on the federal laws, but go to the state.
No, excuse me, I'm cutting this off. This is a discussion about town bylaws.
Yeah.
The philosophic,
Quantity.
and the quantity is staying exactly the same. The sense of regulation is staying the same within the context of mass general law.
I haven't had that proven to me.
Then feel free to read them. That's where the proof comes from. They've been online for quite literally months.
Well, I think I think it's your responsibility and all the members of the bylaw committee to follow that general pattern of simplify, clarify, and eliminate the unnecessary instead of saying, oh, I was in the town on this committee and that committee, and we made these new things that improve the town, and all it is larger quantity of regulations that most people aren't even aware of.
Well, as I said,
And
As I-
you
as
gotta
I have-
educate.
that's one of the reasons we're here today. It's why we've been here the last 3 Sundays. It's why we've made everything as available as we can. The number of meetings that have gone on about bylaws is extensive. And so we have done what we believe is our best job to advertise and to publicize what's happening. But in no way could I force someone to go to the website or read the 150-page document, right, Karen?
But do you have
I think
the,
it's down to 148 now, but.
Oh,
do you have the current bylaws document, especially after this gets voted on or whatever, that somebody can take and compare to one from 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever?
That would be a big problem because we don't have electronic copies of the old editions of bylaws.
Right.
However, could someone do it? Absolutely, we have that facility today. We've had that facility because you can put side by side the old and the new and see what read the differences. The differences are documented at the bottom of every bylaw textually,
Well, that's the
but
kind of thing I'd like to see from your committee,
Yep.
from the
Our
planning
office-
board and from all of these. Now, so it costs a little more to do and get into the citizens' hands. But in the long run, or even in the short run, look at last year, for example, it saves thousands more dollars because then you have the people understanding it better and voting more intelligently instead of automatically things basically going up. And I think
your committee started, what, 4 years
I've
ago?
covered everything
5 years
important to
ago?
me on that.
17,
Okay.
7 years ago.
I was gonna say, so I know that they've been working on this since 2017. I know it's been very well publicized. I know you've had it up on the website for quite some time. And I've never had a problem when I've had questions of reaching out to you folks, and you've always given me the information I've needed. I think it all just comes down to individual preference to getting to know the information. That's the whole thing. You can't expect somebody to feed you the information. Sometimes you have to go out and look for it.
Any other questions so far on the scenic roads bylaw specifically? Let's sort of narrow our focus back again.
What else is there beyond this?
We're not even close to the last chapter yet. This is chapter 6 of 8.
Right.
So there are another 15 bylaws beyond this.
And in the handout I gave you is what's
So I gotta look up in here, okay. So I have this now,
Yeah, you have this in your
I have
hands.
this now, that's great.
And on the website, it has both the old and the new.
Correct.
I don't see a lot of other people here who should have it though. Hopefully they got computers and can navigate the system, but
Or they go to the town clerk's office and ask for a copy. And she's happy to provide them.
well, thank you for your presentation, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Stop in tomorrow if you would like a copy.
Okay, take care now.
Thank you. Next change on our list beyond notification is we are putting we have put in the proposed bylaw a lot more notifications to other committees especially, to make sure that all the committees and tree warden are interested, who could be interested, get the notification of what's going on. The current bylaw is unclear. back up. Somebody destroys a wall, or somebody plans to destroy a wall or a section of it. Planning board has the authority to not only grant permission, but to, for it in advance, or when someone does something without the permit, can enforce that something be done to compensate for the changes that were made. Sometimes it's rebuild what you tore down. Sometimes it's, okay, you need it for this driveway, I get that, so how about if you rebuild the section over here so that there's total, the net sum is roughly equal. And same thing for trees, cutting trees, planting new trees. This compensatory action, or list of compensatory actions, nowhere does the current bylaw say that needs to be in writing. Nor does it say that in writing you have to say when it needs to be done by. And all of that is now in the bylaw. And that's scenic roads and federal law and
Peter's
legal
favorite roads,
philosophy.
right?
I remember a couple of go-arounds with this one.
Yep, oh yeah.
Ooh.
You may want to have your committee read it, because legal made quite a few changes. This still represents a set of changes. The way it's represented is different than it was when your committee last saw it.
Okay, because we got that email, I think, a year or two ago.
Yeah, and it stayed that way until last week. Last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that.
Okay, can you send that, can you just send like a link?
I'll find, yes,
That would be
absolutely.
wonderful. Thank you. I mean, Lynn's on the committee, so she would know, but,
Yes, right. Actually, these she doesn't know.
She was
These
out,
came
I
in,
think.
these changes came in after our last committee meeting.
oh, okay,
So I'm the only person who formally reviewed them. The committee decided that was okay.
okay.
And again, there are a lot of little things that changed, but as you can tell from the differences, the flow is slightly different. There's a lot more about hearings. There's a lot, I don't remember all the changes. I remember that when I look at the raw word file from legal, it's all these different colors from each person who contributed to it. And it's at least two, I know offhand of two attorneys at KB Law who interacted with this law.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go a little bit longer before we take a break. Current bylaw, permit for entering highways, which we renamed connecting driveways to roads. Same fundamental thing. If you're gonna, you need a permit to make a curb cut, which is how you connect a driveway to a road. That's the same. The permit granting authority is now the Department of Public Works. I don't even remember what it currently is today. Maybe we just added that to make it very clear. And we're also clear about what roads are owned by the state and therefore not subject to the town's jurisdiction. It has always been confusing when you have a road that has a state assigned number as to whether the town owns the road or the state owns the road. We put the list in there and hopefully it doesn't change so frequently, hopefully.
10 minutes after you print this, it's gonna change.
This is the legislature, they don't move that quickly. But, actually, it's the whichever DOT, I suppose. Moving on. Renaming bylaw to establish official names of streets, the third worst title for a bylaw, in my opinion, in our arsenal of bylaws. It's now street names. Street names were originally done by a committee formed at town meeting to organize the streets, to say, here's the official name. That committee's not existed for a very long time, so we stripped out everything about that committee.
1898.
18, there we go. The planning board has the sole authority to name a road, whether it's public or private. Planning board assigns that name. But we're added that they're required to consult with the town clerk, the assessor, and public safety to ensure that that the names are sufficiently unique, so we don't have a this circle and a this road and a this street to do nothing but cause confusion, especially for public safety.
That's being done now, right, Anita?
I'm sorry,
That is being done
I
now?
was thinking something else. I was.
Planning board comes,
A mental note to Ben, sorry.
Okay.
planning board does come to you now to make sure that the streets aren't duplicated or whatnot.
Or we try to be proactive
Right,
also.
exactly.
And
Nope.
and we've actually changed a couple, is that Form K or something,
Yep.
when we've noticed something. Yeah,
The beauty of the town clerk's office is they are the central clearinghouse for a lot of things, a lot of processes. Where do new streets come from? Generally, subdivisions. And the town clerk's office gets a copy of subdivision plans for holding and for posting. Now, I'm not saying they'll get it before the planning board does, because the planning board needs that same information to actually determine that it's a legal and valid subdivision. So because the town clerk's office is the nexus of so much information, it's a great place to put this, it makes it very much easier for the town clerk's office to know that something's happening and to initiate a communication, if you will.
in fact, I've had a conversation with the planning board member about the street names for the heights.
Ah, yes.
They don't seem to be Rutland. But I don't know if that's going anywhere. But I am watching street names, let's put it that way.
And we made it an explicit requirement of the planning board for this consultation. It's not up to the town clerk's office to notice. It shouldn't be. Oh, here's a new subdivision plan, let's go into it. Oh, here are the street names they want to give, though you have to find over 12 pages of plans to say,
In the case of the RDIC, isn't the planning board out of that? And isn't that HPDD?
nope, HPDD does not have authority on street names. All street names, public and private, are the authority of the
So they
planning
have
board
to come to
only.
the planning board regardless of whatever board or commission
That is
thinks.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know what the proposed names are?
No.
Harmony, Integrity, and a third one.
Fidelity?
Fidelity, there you go.
Perfect on me. You're not town roads. Keep them private, don't care what they call them as long as
I
it
know.
doesn't match.
I know. But
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to maintain them, that's perfect.
I mean, as an aside, it is an interesting question to me, because I'm a nerd. Yes, these are private streets, but are these private streets with public access? I don't know. I don't know that it makes a difference. If somebody were to put up a gate, my wife's father lived in a gated community. You had to know the gate code to get in. That's not private access, that's not public access. Now, I don't think there are gonna be gates up there, but it's just a funny question that I ask myself. Because there are in fact different legal requirements for public ways, and private ways open to the public. They have unique sets of things going on with them. Moving on. There's sort of currently a wishful thinking in the bylaw that assumes that somehow, somewhere, the Registry of Deeds gets the names of all the streets. Now, today, we now know that the subdivision developers notify the Registry of Deeds about street names. But this does leave a big gaping hole. Suppose the town wants to create a new road. They wanna Right now, we have Glenwood and Campbell that together join up to Route 56 just before 68. Well, what if the town wanted to build another road somewhere in between Palmagussit and Glenwood? Somebody still has to make sure this stuff happens. So it's still the planning board is the authority to get the name, and then somebody, town clerk's office, is probably going to end up being responsible for doing the work with the registry of deeds for these public roads. And we explicitly said, look, the town clerk's responsible for maintaining the official list of streets. Oh boy, is it time for a break. Okay. So the last one was my third least favorite bylaw name. This is my current second least bylaw, a bylaw to establish a uniform system of numbering houses and other structures. Now it's just called structure numbers. Do I remember correctly that house numbers are supposed to be in a planning board by the current bylaw? Or am I misremembering that?
That they're supposed to be in?
That the bylaw,
Oh, there isn't anything that I think,
Oh, okay.
well, I think it does say, I can't remember exactly how it said it, but it is the planning board, but also, it's never been the planning board.
right, they've never done the work.
I think Sally gave it back to the planning board. Irene did them. Sally gave it back to the planning board, and then I think it was a mutual agreement that it came back to the town clerk's office. Part-time planning board, no planner.
So we're changing it, the town clerk assigns numbers. Yes, checking with the assessor and public safety and all of that, but they don't have to check with planning. So that's one of this is a big change. We've been violating the bylaw for more years than I care to think about.
Well, exactly, but as our process was, we always, if it's not a cut clear, I always involve assessor and fire chief, so. And we've always notified government, the Mass 911, but now it's gonna be in the bylaws, so.
Right. The current bylaw says it's a number every 100 feet. We've changed that to 50 feet because of our current zoning. I know far too many times I've heard, does that mean we're gonna renumber every house on every street? No. No, we're not changing anybody's house number or barn or business, the addresses are staying the same. But new numbers will be set aside, will be allocated for each 50 feet of road. Anita already mentioned this next one, the state 911 and the post office.
We send them to postmaster.
The current bylaw says that the numerals, not the numbers, but the numerals, which is however the number is represented in text or in numeric form, it doesn't matter, shall be black or in a color contrasting with the area surrounding the number. Well, okay, but if you have a dark house and you have a black number, that's not gonna be visible, violates the intent. So we got rid of the black or. We always say is that the numbers, the numerals, shall be in a contrasting color with the background. And finally, we say explicitly that the structure owner is responsible and for installing and maintaining the visibility and readability. Currently, it says occupant, but if you're a renter, why should you be responsible for putting numbers on the house where you live? And that's That's structure numbers. Chapter 7, Natural Resources. First bylaw is earth removal, that we are proposing no changes at all to that bylaw for really two reasons, but the big one is that the Earthworks Board is working on a new bylaw to replace the Earth Removal Board, and that'll come up eventually. There's no benefit to the Ad Hoc By-law Committee spending time on it. Moving on to stormwater.
That was a fun one,
Adopted in 2019, maybe,
around then, yeah.
around then.
More recent than that.
So,
That was an unfunded mandate that we had to do, right?
of the federal government, I was about to say, it all starts with the feds and the EPA.
I was gonna say.
And there's more fun coming.
The EPA has a permitting process to allow what they call a municipal separate sewer stormwater system, MS4. They have a lot of regulations about how it needs to operate and how it deals with things. And we have 3 bylaws we're supposed to have written. We have 1, 2 more are coming maybe in May, probably next November. This is actually not the name. The proper name is Stormwater: illicit discharges and connections. Or maybe it's illicit connections and discharges. Doesn't matter. This all has to do with stuff getting into the MS4 that does not belong. And that means a permit was not acquired in order to connect to it. It's a connection that had been there for 30 years, that somebody just connected ages ago. This is not the sewer system, this is only stormwater. So these are all the grates in the roads. Most of the changes are structural because it was, quite frankly, a mess. It was so hard to follow. We at least tried to give a flow to it. Here's how you apply, here's the permitting process, here's how decisions are made, here's with a flow that way rather than we're gonna talk about how decisions are made and somewhere over there is where we're gonna talk about how you apply, all of that. It's structural changes for that without changing any of the content. The biggest problem with that bylaw is all the responsibility is with the select board, which is wrong. The stormwater system is a public work, and so it belongs with the Board of Public Works. Most things, there are actually, I can think of only one place where we now reference the select board because the select board bylaw has certain executive authority that we need to deal with, but most of the time, it's the Board of Public Works. Yes, it's the same people. Yes, separate body. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. At the beginning of this meeting, I talked about the Attorney General's comments, their response to us. But when we put in the current stormwater management bylaw, after it was passed, it was sent off to the AG's office. The AG's office said, hey, you are not allowed to require a permit for any work that is a statutory mandate of a government agency. So if the state says, by law, I am required to do this work, we can't stop it. So they are exempt from the permitting process. And now hopefully that comment won't ever come back again from the AG's office. And that, by the way, is a good example of something we've done throughout. I've mentioned we've gone through the general laws. We've also gone through the Attorney General's responses to the laws. Not necessarily every single one, usually the most recent one, maybe 2, but that's part of the committee's duties. So really, stormwater's not changing. primarily other than calling out the Board of Public Works. Water use restrictions. This bylaw is all about what happens in droughts. And there are different conditions that the state can set down, and there are conditions that the town can set down. This looks like a whole new bylaw, because it is a whole new bylaw. It's a whole new bylaw because we started not with, well, we did start with the current bylaw, but then we looked around and discovered that there is a model bylaw that is much, much, much newer than our current water use restrictions bylaw. So we started with the model. And yes, we tweaked quite a few things based on how our bylaw acts and therefore the elements that we needed to have in there. For example, the no automated sprinklers on public water supply, no new ones ever. Because we passed that a couple of years ago now. But it functionally, it really isn't any different. It looks very different. A lot of the words are different, but its effect is really the same. Questions on natural resources. There will, in time, the Conservation Commission is working on a wetlands protection bylaw. That'll come in here. But it's not there yet, so moving on. Chapter 8, the everything else chapter. If it doesn't fit in one of the other chapters, that it just sits there. That's one of the reasons we formed the chapters the way we did, to do our best to minimize the number of bylaws in the everything else chapter, the other matters chapter. Starting with animal control. When I read the animal control bylaw, and then I and the committee went back and reviewed the enabling statute in Mass General Law, we saw a lot of the words that were same. So we said, why is this in both places? Why does it help us? As a rule, we strip out sections that duplicate Mass General Law, unless we specifically want to stress something that's really useful for the people to know. So that's what that first one's all about. Many things that duplicate. And one of those things, all the definitions, because they all differ from Mass General Law. Some in very meaningful ways, some in not meaningful ways. There is no question we don't want confusion. And the way we eliminate confusion is we don't have differing definitions from Mass General Law. Makes it easier for the animal control officer and the police, makes it easier for the lawyers. One of the big problems in today's animal control bylaw is that it says explicitly that a personal kennel, okay, kennels are a collection of dogs, more than 4. And there are 5 or 6 different types of kennels, all spelled out in Mass General Law. There's a personal kennel, which is your own dogs. There's a veterinary kennel. There's a commercial kennel. They're all defined there. Our current bylaw, animal control bylaw, says kennels may be placed, personal kennels may be placed without a special permit from the ZBA. Why is there a problem? Because our current zoning bylaw says that all kennels require ZBA approval with a special permit. Zoning law always trumps general law, which means I don't care what's written in the current bylaw, it doesn't apply. So we took out that business and we changed the statement, kennels may only be placed in conformance with the zoning bylaw, fine. Sneak peek to what's ahead, we have a zoning bylaw change that proposed that implements this change. We'll talk about that after the general bylaws. current bylaw says that if you have more than 10 dogs, well, you need a kennel. It's a personal kennel. But if you have more than 10 dogs, you need a second kennel license. We got rid of all that. Because frankly, it's a lot of pain in the butt stuff for not a lot of value to the town.
We do have a couple people that have more than 10 dogs though, but it's only a handful.
Yep.
And it did streamline it. It will streamline it.
Current bylaw says that kennel is inspected every year by the animal control officer. That's what the law says today. Then they say if it fails, you have 10 days to fix whatever ails it, whatever the problems are. We removed the arbitrary 10-day limit. We said the animal control officer will tell you what's wrong and when it must be fixed. And in no event, if it fails an inspection, may a kennel permit be issued until they're all satisfied and the ACO signs off. I think we have a couple more words about what the ACO looks for, that there's enough space and it's sufficiently sanitary, basically following best practices. Okay. Nuisance dogs. The current bylaw says a dog not on a leash or a dog that defecates but the owner doesn't pick up the refuse or the dog barks too much, the definitions are in the bylaw, is a nuisance dog. Except that you can, by mass general law, a dog can only be declared a nuisance after a public hearing. We followed nuisance and dangerous dog mass general law, not our current bylaw. We made them align. There has to be a hearing by the select board and there has to be stuff that occurs and all of the process that goes in there. For a dog to even be declared a nuisance, they have to go through a hearing. There are certain orders that we have in our bylaw that are not in mass general law, but they are more restrictive than mass general law, so they're not offensive to the law. And I mentioned those things. The dog is not automatically a nuisance. A neighbor or the animal control officer can request the public hearing to declare that dog a nuisance. But have it happen, when it happens, it's still finable. Now, this is a shortcut, not on a leash. We did, by the way, strengthen the language for leash at the attorney's, at town council's suggestion. But it's not on a leash anywhere. It's not on a leash on public land. Or not on a leash on private land that they don't have permission to go on. I'm not gonna write all that here. Unless that dog is either involved in hunting or other sport or I forget what all the exceptions are. There are a bunch of exceptions in the law, fine. Or if they're training for any of those activities, then not being on a leash is fine. There. That's the run-through animal control. Questions on that?
So basically, could the animals still be declared a nuisance after the fact that they were fined, or would
Yes,
there be some?
absolutely, that can
So
happen.
basically, the fining is kind of a stopgap in between, in a sense.
Yes. I would imagine, and this is just, dangerous dogs are single event danger. Dog attacks a person. There's no question that dog is a danger, and so one would think it would be acted upon. But I would think that a nuisance dog would need repetitive events, but that's not my choice. it's, at the end of the day, it's up to the select board to make that decision. And considering the nature of setting up a public hearing to declare somebody a nuisance, you wouldn't want to do it for every event anyway. Okay. The next two bylaws, door-to-door solicitation and peddling and fingerprint-based criminal record background check. By the way, that is my least favorite bylaw name. The committee worked, I don't want to say tirelessly, although we were tireless, but did quite a bit of work to bring door-to-door solicitation and peddling up to snuff. The current bylaw is, quite frankly, a piece of garbage, and likely several parts of it are unenforceable. And on top of that, we have this fingerprint-based criminal record background check. Another thing that is, my reading of it makes portions of it questionable. I understand what was going behind both of those. I got the 40-minute lecture on them from the person who started them. But the committee went through and basically tied these two together, because not only tied, really combined them. The only element of fingerprint-based criminal background check that is used today is for door-to-door solicitors. That's the only time, I mean, in terms of our bylaws. And for the professions that are listed that require it, that's the only one that's used. No, we don't have any secondhand dealers in town, so of course we wouldn't ever. So we worked on combining these, taking the important parts of this for how you do criminal record checks and putting it into solicitation and peddling. Yes, we changed, that's actually a small error. We had changed it to peddling. The current bylaw name is canvassing, but we didn't like that word, but we're not going to change it. Okay, so we did the work to combine them and straighten them out, we think, and then we sent it off to legal review. Town council's response was, yeah, we have concerns, including but not limited to the First Amendment issues being raised. Here's a new model bylaw for you to start with. We said, we don't have time. We're out of time. And so we decided to leave these two bylaws alone. By not modifying them, the AG's office doesn't get another crack at them. Because we are not submitting any changes at all to these, to the AG's office, because there's no change. No change, nothing to review. That's why those two bylaws are not in the packet that we created about Article 3. They're not there. They don't, I mean, they exist, they're part of our bylaws, but the AG's office doesn't get to look at them. It will be, up to the new permanent bylaw committee when they get seated this will be one of their charges, because there is real work to be done there. Currently named Master Key Security Boxes, being renamed to Emergency Entry Systems. The current bylaw says there has to be a box on the building that's approved by the fire department that they can use when they need to enter the building, especially off hours. They have to be able to get into the building 24/7, period. And they need to do that for, well, the emergency case, there's a fire, obvious. But also, they need to do inspections on whatever fire protection and alarm system that's in the building. And there may not be somebody around. They always have to be able to get in. The current bylaw talks about keys. When everybody thinks about keys, they think about these things, which is fine if you have a physical cylinder lock kind of access. More and more buildings these days have card key access or keypad access. And it doesn't matter what is, the new bylaw really says the fire department needs access and you have to provide it to the fire department. And it could be on a box in the building provided, approved by the fire department, or you could hand them to the fire chief, or you could, there are all the ways so long as the fire department has that access. Now, the new bylaw is based upon the most recent model. Yes, we use model bylaws because that's already been put through Attorney General. Everybody's reviewed it. We know it's going to be good. Yes, we make some tweaks to it that get reviewed, but this whole model was taken from one the fire chief gave us, and that included this new provision. All commercial buildings not normally occupied at all hours shall be required to comply within 12 months of the effective date of this bylaw. Effective date of this bylaw is very likely to be in June-ish. Assuming it gets passed in February, March, April, May, June, yeah, it'll be June-ish when they're done.
June 15th.
And that's when this bylaw would become effective, so June to the following June. By that June, every commercial building in town that is not occupied at 24 hours a day will need to have this thing put in place. I don't know how to count. I'm gonna bet right to farm is 8.5, not 8.4.
Yes, it is. I never noticed that in the last couple of times.
I know, how many times have I read this that I
Because
didn't
it's
see
the
it?
last page.
That's right.
Nice job, Pete, come on.
Sloppy, sloppy, sloppy. It goes along
Since
with my 140 early.
2017 and you can't get this right?
How many times have we changed this table of contents? I don't want to think about it. Moving on, right to farm. By the way, I'll get you a new one.
Thank you.
And Tamika, hopefully she hasn't printed a few dozen already. Okay, right to farm. The approach of the current bylaw is really tilted towards commercial farmers, people who do farming, agriculture for a business. And that's all well and good, but that was not the original intent of the people who wrote it, and we know that because we spoke to people who were involved in it. They took the model bylaw of the day and said, we need to change these few things, and that's what got passed. That's what got adopted at town meeting. One of our concerns from the very beginning of our right to farm consideration was not for the commercial farmers. It's not that we're trying to discount it. Yes, there needs to be a right to farm. I accept the right to farm is the right thing to do in this town. But our concern that we feel was not addressed adequately was what I like to call the citizen farmer. My neighbor who has chickens. What rights does that person have to farm? Isn't that farming, even though it's not a commercial enterprise? Or the person who grows a large set of vegetables or plants for their own consumption. It's clearly not, if they want to self-subsist, don't they have rights for those activities? And are those rights any different than the rights listed in the current bylaw for commercial enterprises? Odors, noises, activities that go on, they are the same. The difference is scale and location. The committee felt that it was important to include the rights of non-commercial farmers in the law. Going to the top. With the current bylaw, it says something that is not entirely fairly accurate that talks about the precedence of the right to farm law with respect to all the other laws. As I said, it wasn't quite accurate. This bylaw makes it very clear. Federal laws and regs, state laws and regs, zoning laws and regs, then right to farm, then all the other general bylaws. That's the best description of the intent of the current bylaw as near as we could figure it out. And that, by the way, is the way the laws are written. I've said before, zoning always trumps general. Always. Because the more specific bylaw always trumps the less specific bylaw, or the more general. We added a bit of word to make dispute resolutions a little more clear, we hope. We even went against town council a little bit, because we have the Agricultural Commission, as in the current bylaw, AgCom has always been intended to be involved in disputes around agriculture. Town council said, I maintain that it is not in the town's best interest to get involved in private matters. And while I philosophically agree with that, there are times when a higher authority needs to be involved to resolve a conflict. As well as it can be anyway. We added something new, based, by the way, on the model bylaw, the current model bylaw. There will be, once this is adopted, assuming it is, the following June, be a requirement that somebody who's going to purchase or rent in town be given a notice to say, this is a right to farm town and this is what it means. And the wording comes from the law, so it's not as clear as I would like that, but it basically says there can be noise, there can be odors, there can be activities at any time of the day or night. There can be slow vehicles on the road, there can be all the things that happen because of farming. Just so that whoever's moving into town recognizes that it's a right to farm community and that farmers have rights too. Now, this is a very weak requirement, and I say that because the Ad Hoc By-law Committee couldn't find anybody who would be right to send the notifications to make sure that they're all done. Now, as a practical matter, the town will let the top builders and the top renting agencies in town know that this is now a requirement, and it's going to be another slip of paper in the stack of papers you have to sign as part of your closing. But nobody in town is going to track that it's done because we couldn't find a body that makes sense. Some towns use the Agricultural Commission. That's a body that either doesn't have people or enough time, right? Do I want to put it on the assessor's office? Very busy. Do I want to put it on town clerks? I don't want to put it on any of the offices to ensure that that we receive them so we can track who got them and who didn't.
So I know, it's me. Why are we bothering asking for it if we're not gonna track it? Because what happens if it doesn't, I go to sell my house and I say, screw you, yeah, I'm not gonna do it, cause I just wanna, get the price and get out.
Right.
And then there's no legal recourse to go against me.
Well, back up. Yes, there is legal recourse. There's always legal recourse because to not supply it is in fact a violation of the law. Because we don't have anybody tracking it, we don't have the teeth to ensure that it will be done. Mm-hmm. Which is why we say, as a practical matter, if the real estate agents know, they'll do it because it's just another slip of paper. It's a little more complicated for the rental case. I understand that.
We tried to find a town a lot of towns have that in their bylaw, but nobody has come up with a way to
It's
really,
mainly just a way to say, hey, listen, you're moving into a town, there's gonna be smells, there's gonna be this, there's gonna be that.
Right.
Deal with it, or don't buy this house, but the fact is that
you could smell
It is what it
manure.
is.
It'll happen. 4 days a year, I know when Randy puts out manure, and that's okay with me.
Yep.
Yes, I'm caught behind tractors more often than I like on Glenwood Road. It happens, or Main Street, whatever.
How many times you get stuck behind a school bus? I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
Or-
slow move, that's a slow moving vehicle.
Yes, it is. That makes frequent stops, see? So, part of the discussion with the select board was, well, if we do this, aren't there a lot of other things that should be notified? And their attitude was, there are so many things that should be notified in this town, we shouldn't do this one now. And content of the bylaw is the committee, not the select board. So we said, if we don't start doing something, we'll never do it. Let's start with one. And have the rest of the town catch up for other notifications that should be done. That is our attitude. And as Anita said, it is in a lot of bylaws because it's in the model.
Sure, it makes sense because it's hopefully, by letting people know, it's going to stop some of the complaints and then hopefully minimize the resolution
Right.
process and all that kind of stuff. Cause
And-
all comes, start from the beginning and work your way down, it should make it easier.
There is
necessarily.
we talked about, but we don't have the authority to do it. We had a discussion about, assuming this gets adopted, sending something out to everybody in town. So everybody's got notified as of today, whatever the day is, as a point, but it's money. And maybe it's something we can put in the census for the following year. That's an easy way to do it if we can fit it in. I don't know what the right, I don't know if there's a singularly right answer. I know I don't know a singularly right answer, but this is as well as we're going to do, I think, for now. I think we should begin with notification of things that residents should just know. Most laws have what's called a severability clause. Severability is the ability to take out or sever a portion of the law. If the town is ever sued because of, in this case, the right to farm bylaw, then a judge can say, this portion, this one clause, section 4A, 2C, 9, whatever, is illegal and is stricken. Severability means only that one section called out by the court can be ignored from now on. The rest of the law stays intact. We removed the severability clause from this law. Why? This goes back to the previous talk, the previous session. The very first, here, let me go back. General provisions. We have severability in general provisions that covers, that has it in one place, we don't need it in every bylaw, that covers all laws, all regulations, all rules. So if a court says this portion of your Title V regs are illegal, guess what? Only that one section gets stricken. So we don't need it in every bylaw. So not surprisingly, we struck it. Questions on right to farm? Signs. 16 pages of hell that I have maintained for a few years should actually be a zoning bylaw, not a general bylaw, but that discussion isn't important. It was,
Future it will be.
that's right, it was too big for us to get done in time for this town meeting. So we said, this is one of the bylaws that we said, that's for the next, for the permanent bylaw committee to address, not the ad hoc. And we figured that'd be hell enough for them to really cut their teeth on laws. Originally, it was just gonna be signs and whatever the earthworks board comes up with to replace the earth removal bylaw, and then also added on the criminal record check and the door-to-door stuff. Those are the four now. And we're disappointed that it's that list is twice as big, but you gotta go with what you have, not what you want. Stretch Energy Code, something the town passed under Margaret as town administrator, as one of the steps for Rutland to be considered a green community. What this means is that, the baseline the baseline building code says, here are the attributes of the building as it goes to energy consumption. Well, there's an appendix to the building code that says stretch, which is tighter constraints. Both are changing. Every 3 years they change. We have a bylaw that says we have to use the more strict energy usage guidelines, or excuse me, rules, not guidelines. The reference to the name, the identifier of the appendix changed, so we changed it everywhere. It's no longer Appendix 105.AA, it's now Appendix AA of the Massachusetts Building Code. And there was an effectivity date, an effectivity clause that we just stripped out because the bylaw is effective. There's no value to saying that. It was effective long enough ago that everybody's impacted by it or has to behave according to this. That's the end of general bylaws. Any questions on the generals? Not even limited to today. Okay. Let's take a few minutes. Yes, go ahead.
I might have come in here late. Town administrator, I just happened to notice, has broad appointment and removal powers.
You betcha.
Are we changing the appointment of boards and commissions and having the town administrator do that, or is that still going to be with the select board?
That is still the select board, explicitly. Now, okay, hold on, back up. So broad appointment powers really refers mostly to department heads.
Okay.
Mass General Law has some department heads that must be appointed by the select board, and others where it doesn't say who the appointing power is. So those that must be appointed by the select board, or shall be appointed by the select board, are in the select board bylaw. And everybody else is the town administrator bylaw, who needs to be explicitly specified. Then on top of that, there's the whole delegation of authority, delegation of powers. So it is not unusual. And in fact, today, the select board has delegated all appointment powers of people that are to the town administrator. And that can still happen. I wouldn't even want to try and prevent that for good reasons. So when I mean broad, it's really, really, really broad. However, well, let me go back and say it again. The select board in the select board bylaw has the authority to appoint volunteer committees. But since all powers can be delegated, there's no way to say that they can't delegate it to the town administrator, but they have not delegated it to the town administrator. Yet. Everything's a yet, you know? That's town meeting, not town administrator. And I invite everyone to do what Karen did, which is to download that 148-page document and read the whole thing. And, well, I've said more than once, if you're having trouble falling asleep, bylaw book.
Yep. Pretty much, yep. But that's true of mass law.
Of all laws.
I mean, it just doesn't make a difference. That'll always put you to sleep.
It is unfortunate that we were not allowed to unleash our creative sides. There are things I would put in that are jokes, that I would make clearer jokes, but that's a bad idea for laws.
And Peter tried footnotes.
I try, oh yeah.
The committee thought they were very appropriate and legal made them all go away.
Yeah, there's still a couple, but not a lot. All right. Let's take a few minutes and discuss zoning bylaw changes up at town meeting. And I'm bringing this up because select board put that on the agenda for me, so. There are 6 warrant articles at town meeting on Thursday. The first 3 cover all the general bylaws. First one is chapter 1 and 2, which is the real foundation of government. The next one is chapters 3, 4, and 5, which is the rest of government. And then 6 through 8 is everything else. I am very interested to see what happens on town meeting floor. But there are also 3 zoning bylaw changes being proposed. The first one has to do with that kennel stuff we talked about before. It says personal kennels don't need ZBA approval. They are by right, where they are allowed. No, personal kennels aren't allowed in industrial zones, because how can you have something personal in the industrial zone? I don't know. Now, zoning bylaw is highly complicated and highly specialized, and I am no expert in zoning bylaw, but this change turned out to be a little more invasive, not just because we said personal kennels are by right, but we also propose extending the zones where kennels may be placed. Today, they're allowed in residential and business zones, but no other zones. In the proposed change, it's also allowed in light industrial and light industrial office, mostly for the commercial kennel or the kennels for guard dogs, for example. It's a good place to keep them is on the property they're protecting. And everything else does require ZBA approval in order to get the permit, which will allow the ACO to inspect and allow the town clerk to issue the permit. Still a whole process. So we're extending the zones where kennels are allowed, and wherever allowed, personal kennels are allowed by right. That's Article 4. Is Article 5 no, Article 5 is not that. Article 5 is fixing a problem with the HPDD zoning law. Sorry, it's not. It is fixing the one element of the limited development bylaw, the managed growth bylaw. The managed growth bylaw has a specific provision, and it is explicit and it is specific, so it trumps everything else. It says that residential housing at the heights is not exempt from the building limitation. They want to put 70-something buildings and 144 units, because they're all duplexes, up there. But if they can only build 3 a quarter, how long will it take them to build out? Which also, by the way, conflicts with the agreement that we have with them, that if they don't build out a certain amount in a certain amount of time, they give us money. That's not operating exactly in good faith. So this next proposed amendment is to remove that one sentence, that one clause, if you will, from the managed growth bylaw, which basically allows them to build all the units right away if they want, or to be able to get building permits for all of them right away. I'm going to ignore how long everything takes. I'm gonna, pretend that everything's ideal and the building inspector has all the plans that he needs and it knows everything. Let's forget all that. Article 6. We have for a time had a problem on the planning board with special permits. Special permits require a 2/3 majority of the planning board, which by math, because you can't have a partial person and a partial vote, means 4 out of 4 people must vote to approve a special permit. Any special permit. We've had one member absent,
One previous member.
previous, you're right. We've had a member absent for a substantial number of meetings, well, that means only 4 people are present. And when, not if, when one person did a recuse, that it was not possible to sign the special
Or
permit.
another one was ill or something like that.
Somebody else could be ill, somebody could just be absent. There are lots of good reasons for people for there to not be enough people there. And so based on yet another model bylaw, the planning board is proposing a change to allow what's called an associate planning board member. This member is not elected, this member is appointed by the joint body of the planning board and the select board. This person is authorized by Mass General Law only to vote on special permits. Which helps with the special permit case. But this committee and the planning board had discussions and we said, this makes a great training ground for somebody to become a planning board member. And so one of the things that's in the bylaw is that the associate planning board member shall have voice on any issue before the planning board. They're allowed to say and discuss things. And not just as a member of the public, but as an associate member. They get preferential treatment, if you will, over the general public. And we do that, the law says that so that this person will have more interest, we hope, than just the special permits. Again, special permits, the only thing this person can vote on. But there's no reason to stop this person being involved in all the other planning board matters. So that's what Article 6 does, is it creates this position. Questions on any of the zoning stuff? That, my friends, is all I have to say. Well, I think, until I get the next question.
Until Thursday.
Well, I still need to find out who's making motions.
I assumed it was you and that Norm would be making the others. It's just kind of the way
Well, it hasn't been that way for a couple of town administrators, that's why I don't know. I don't care. If I make the motion, great. If it's rotated through the select board, fine, I don't care.
But you should ask.
Yes, I should know going into the meeting what I'm expected to do.
Maybe I've seen the motions and I have seen the motions and
It's been a while since I've looked at them, I'll admit.
I think it does say by
Okay.
ad hoc, but I'll take a look.
Well, it says sponsored by.
Oh, that's right.
I don't care. That's a minor process question. Doesn't mean I won't get up and speak once or twice.
I think you'll have questions asked.
Anyway, I look forward to seeing both of you and everyone else who's been at any of the meetings and hopefully a bunch more people in the Blair Room Thursday at 6 o'clock. Anything else?
We're good.
I think we're all set. Thank you very much for attending. I do appreciate everyone who comes out.